Chapter 2 Laughter of the Gods. Carl exited his car, barely aware of anything that had changed for him. The idea of an overseer, the reader, being perpetually present and capable of seeing him as he would be in his own mind's eye, and by his own intention, was not a new concept to him. He was a performer at heart, and the prospect of being watched didn't bother him. In fact, he longed for the idea of having something like the reader keeping an eye on him. He prided himself on the honest self-awareness of even his darkest and deep-seated thoughts. His way would be one of clarity of being, and that was all there was to it. A body holding a mind in a manner all too temporary by its own standards, and, by virtue of its temporary and thus pressurized being, a generator of soul by which to connect to humanity. It didn't matter if not another being understood him as he intended himself to be. As long as they got something from him, then his part in life would not be for naught. F it, he murmured to himself as he strode through the parking lot on the warm autumnal night. The sounds from the interstate highway gave the impression of wind, but the Texas warmth was evident. He could taste the asphalt in the air, smell the crackling electricity from the lights from the sign above the venue's door, and see the inebriation gripping the crowd inside the doors of the comedy club. "Oh, this is going to be effing sweet," he said under his breath as he moved to the bar to speak with the manager regarding his start time. "Hey, Mac," he said, clapping the stout, dark-haired man on his shoulder. "Cindy shouldn't keep feeding you. You gotta tell her you were full 2 years ago and are done." "The girl wants to keep stuffing me. I'm gonna let her. As long as she doesn't staple my ass cheeks together, I'll be fine," Max said as he realized the incursion upon his personal space was being purported by Carl. Unstapled ass cheeks, the key to every man's weight control. Carl tapped Mac's rotund belly with the back of his hand twice before continuing. "So what's the schedule? How's it rolling? When am I on?" Mac looked around to the audience that was focused on Myrna, the comic, currently on stage as she spoke about her last 3 relationships as though they were one long porno with the worst sex scenes ever. "In about 2 minutes, 3 if she can keep them laughing." "All right," Carl said. "Oh, God," he thought. "I barely have any time before I am on stage. Please, my bowels and bladder do not convince me I need to excrete. I will do fine. This is the same circumstance as every other time. No need to worry. Don't even need a shot. Don't even have time for a shot, do I? I should set one up and have it waiting for me if I don't have time for it. Hey, Cindy," he called to Mac's girlfriend, who tended the bar. "Let me get a shot of something." "Something? You sound like such a dork." And now she's looking at you like you are a teenager trying to pass with a fake ID. Wow, what an incredible memory. Her expression really looks like that clerk's in that shop when I was 17. Was that 25 years ago? Am I really 42? Is any of this even real? Maybe the reader knows if this is real. "Say something, Grand Marnier," he said to her, "and just leave it on the bar if I'm up before you pour it. Thanks, love." "No problem, babe," Cindy said, quickly turning away to get the bottle. I wish she wouldn't say that in front of Mac. She doesn't mean anything by it, but she is just matching the supposed intimacy of when you call her love. You should probably stop calling her that in front of Mac. You don't mean anything inappropriate by it. And there has never been anything intimate with her, but oh, how you have wanted her. No, nothing there. just being charming and friendly and don't want to make Mac suspicious in any way because he decides when you get to go up on that stage, and that is what matters now. That is how you are known. That is how you participate. But that is how you pretend to be connected to the world. What if there is a reader? Why are you thinking about what that goofy little dyed redhead thought up? Because she is so beautiful you can't help giving weight to her ideas or anything to do with her. You want to put weight onto her in the way of pregnancy, you pervert. But she is too young and beautiful and enjoys women more than you. I should have been born later. And a girl. Stop! That's part of your act and part of why you are relieved that Danny doesn't come to see you perform. And no thinking about your act until you are on stage. Why am I referring to myself as you? I wonder if the reader is aware that I'm doing that. His thoughts halted for a moment, and he physically shuddered in reaction to the recognition that his thoughts, his most intimate of his self-defining attributes, could be known by another other than himself. He felt vulnerable and shaken, and suddenly was being given the wave forward by Mac as the applause from the room beckoned him to the stage. He had not heard his name announced, and with the automatic certainty of a somnambulist, he smiled what he knew to be his $1,000,000 grin and conjured the mental script of words, vocal tones, and mannerisms to entertain with comedic grace those persons who had paid to be present in the audience and were only slightly intoxicated by the alcohol they had ingested. His act, however, was not the center of his attention. He had become so well rehearsed in the years of his being such a performer that he noticed his performing self was running through reality like a well-crafted application on the latest mobile device. Understanding he had forgotten to turn his phone back on after he left his dinner with his friends, his mind began to wander with a subtext of thoughts that differed from the expressed thoughts he performed on stage. These background thoughts were more true to his own self than his public persona, and these background thoughts encompassed the majority of his personal awareness and attention. This is smooth, and they are enjoying. By grace and will to being, you are at it again. To know how well you are able to bring joy to others is the greatest experience of knowledge you have. Why am I referring to myself as you again? Is there any real difference between us in that we have a separate self from our own observation? Don't bother with that question. Just be present. Present like Jason when he is crafting his poetic works, like Tabitha when she is performing her music, like Danny when she is, jump that stutter and double play it. Feigned nervousness can disarm the audience, evoke their empathy by way of pathos. When being, as a being can be, what might seem clear from what we hear and see is merely the touch that sparks the grip of the prehensile self that gives more than a quip regarding the form, the matter of fact, and the way of what is known as the shape of what we say. Poesis ain't only for the brooding and self-uncertain, but perhaps it is because mine will forever remain behind the curtain, lost to the presence of others' awareness because I choose to only think it and remain poetically careless. Jason can have the poetry his own, as my people here would leave me alone were I to speak and perform with rhythmic rhyme of this kind, and I could not bear that loneliness. Yet I am alone. Even if the reader were here to know what I think beyond the words of this act I speak, I feel no presence, be it bold and strong, silent and meek. These people know not who I am, but only what I present myself to be. And in the end, that is all I am other than me. Is the me ever to be known? Is there more than what I have shown? Why ask? Why not just be? Is this the pattern I practice? Is this my way of living suspense? What better form of being secure than this line of self-defense? And turn on the right hip to accent that line, and smile with slight mock disgust, and the eyebrow gets them every time. And now the rap of this bit, and then the next two fast, and their laughter is the drug I chase relentlessly, for the high I get will never last. These are the moments I reached to, and never want to go at all, because with the outward appearance in full operation, I have the safety of knowing I would not fall. And onward, like a master crafter, lexicon bag of literary tricks, elocution executed with perfection, and style just to get the attention fix. Deeper to be, more than they see. And what would they think if I were not trite, and bounding through these words just to sound absurd, to give them momentary delights tonight? Lost, these words lost, to never be known, but this music is how I am me. And what greater force is there than keeping this hidden while performing comedic fervor? I live tragedy. Oh, Danny, girl, what have you done to me? Giving me deeper self to traverse with little attention to manner of being. I feel better than ever and also much worse. If she knew what her power is, what she is, and what she can become, I would find myself living a life of grandeur instead of being the old friend playing dumb. All right, Mac, that is that. Give me the light so I can close up. There it is. God, Carl, you've got this showmanship down pat. No wonder you rule the entertainment biz. Not rule in truth, but rule over self and mind and heart as you are. And when it all is done, I am you as you know us, and you find peace in thinking we are the brightest star. He replaced the microphone to the stand on stage amid the applause from the crowd. His smile seemed true to their eyes, but the sadness he held behind it was what he knew. He was showered with attention, yet alone. Stepping back to the bar, he leaned like a wounded tiger against the wood, choosing not to sit on the high stool as he rested his weight on his forearms. And that's how it's done, he said as Cindy nudged the tumbler towards him, the Grand Marnier liquor dancing around the ice and rounding in contained ripples from the movement. Long set tonight, she remarked. Was it? He said. I can never tell. When I'm up there, I'm elsewhere, and time has no meaning. He picked up the glass. How long was my set? 45 minutes, Cindy replied, and a chill ran up his back. He felt an overwhelming sense of blood and viscous fluids rush into the general area of his eyes and nose. Fearing that he was blushing and might cry in a moment, cry for the sheer joy in knowing that he had truly removed himself from his conceptual awareness of time while he was on stage, cry from the knowledge that he had just entertained people for nearly an hour, 15 minutes longer than what he was scheduled to do, and cry from understanding the reality that he would most likely have no better feeling for the rest of the night, perhaps the rest of the week, than he was experiencing at that very moment when he stalled his tears from erupting by commenting on the reality Cindy had just made known to him. Wow, I gotta thank Mac for letting me stay up there. I think he's about to thank you for working your magic, Cindy said, gesturing with a nod of her head toward Mac approaching the bar before she turned away to fulfill a large drink order from one of the waitstaff. Kevin was cursing you a few moments ago, Mac said, clapping Carl on the shoulder twice, leaving his hand there after the second in an act that brought an earnest quality of contented connection to Carl's smile. Because I ran long? Carl asked while glancing up to Kevin on stage. Because you were on fire tonight, Mac responded. I don't know where your riffing came from at the end there, but no one would want to follow that. Well, you win some, you lose some. Why am I referring to myself as you? And tonight you won in a big way, Mac said as Carl began hoisting his after-set drink. Carl was surprised that Mac's other hand gently came to hold the tumbler in place mid-movement during the travel to his lips. And I will make you a deal. Mac looked directly at Carl, and his worn expression was of seriousness and concern. I will cash you out now for your set and include your comp for drinks if you get the hell out of here now. Carl lowered the glass back to the bar with curiosity behind his eyes. Did I do something wrong? He wondered if his verbal familiarity with Cindy earlier had grated on Mac's nerves. Not at all, Mac said, sitting on the stool next to Carl in such a way that he could pitch his voice without being distracting to the room. I just see you when you are sober, and want you to know that you're much more valuable than anything you think or feel you are once you get a few drinks in you. Carl was speechless in reaction to this kindness. Mac went on. I've noticed you developing your act in the last few months, and as good as you are, I've been around your kind enough to know internal alienation when I see it. He shifted closer to Carl. I don't know what you're harboring, but there's a disconnect present between you and the audience when you really get going. Is it that obvious? Asked Carl sheepishly. Leaning back on the stool, Mac raised his left eyebrow with a slight smirk. Not to the untrained eye, but like I said, I've seen enough to identify it when it is there. He leaned on the bar. And maybe I'm seeing something that's not there. And you should just make the most of my generosity based on misplaced concern. But I would rather know that if you are hurting from something, that I am not instrumental in your numbing the pain with inebriance, because that can be the worst thing for your kind. He looked out to the audience that was finally warming up to Kevin with giggles and laughs. You folks implode so fast once you reach a critical mass of angst. He shifted his eyes back to Carl, who watched him with all the attention of a juggler flipping chainsaws in the air. And I've become adept at noticing the warning signs. Like what? Carl's best skeptical grin unfurled upon his face with the calculated grace of a demon in angel robes. Like subtle nuances, the distant look in your eyes, the near mechanical manner of some of your delivery. Mac leaned in again. You may be a master at public presentation, but I can see that there was more to you than what you were displaying, something you were thinking and hiding, but something that preoccupied that brilliant brain of yours as you were doing what you do so well. And he leaned in a little closer, in a manner that would otherwise have caused Carl to lean away instinctively to preserve his personal space, yet intrigued Carl so much that he stayed as calm and as still as he could, going so far as to hold his breath so he could hear what Mac had next to say in a voice so private it sounded like a sordid revelation given to a priest who clutched a Bible while sitting in the confessional booth. Before you reconcile that you with what you did on stage and how everyone in this room thinks you may be, by consuming this tasty, chilled, and fun form of poison purveyed by my establishment, he nudged the glass, holding the liquid on the bar slightly away from Carl. I ask you to give yourself the kind of respect and care that I have for you as the incredible person you are. Mac leaned away while keeping his eyes on Carl's, smiling like a wise sage without the slightest hint of insincerity in his face. Carl kept looking at him over his left shoulder. His eyes looked down slightly for a moment as he thought, is this as close to a real connection as can get? If his certainty in what he just said is based on his genuine feeling for my well-being, it doesn't matter if he knows the details of my thoughts or not. Just the fact that he saw that something was there, some semblance of a self that is more than what I performed, a wisp of a shadow fleetingly glimpsed by a well-honed eye, is all that matters. He saw. Even if he doesn't know, he saw. Carl shifted his eyes that he could feel welling up again with wet joy back to Mac. He inhaled heavily to hold the tears in and bit his lower lip as he nodded his head. Mac smiled and leaned back over the bar. Hey, Sind, he called, and she turned, her line of vision directed toward Carl more so than Mac. Cash out our star with comp included. What about that drink? She gestured to the filled tumbler that sat before Carl at the bar. Leave it and get it to Kevin when he's done. Mac looked back to Carl with a satisfied grin. He'll probably need it after that. Motioning to the comedian, stumbling on his words, Max stood up from the stool and touched Carl's shoulder again, a gesture so simple yet endearing that a tingle of warmth spread across his neck and shoulders. Get on out of here, and I will call you tomorrow. Max strode into the main room to circle around the back of the crowd. He was heading toward the soundboard at the back of the room, where he would use the light to signal Kevin to wrap it up. Carl watched the room for a moment, astounded at the notion that he had felt something better than the elation of him giving a stellar performance while wrapped in his own thoughts. He marveled at how his hidden self, the most sacred ideal he had, was known to exist by someone other than himself. His attention was called back from the thought as he saw the light for Kevin begin to flash. There you go, darling, Cindy said, placing the cash on the bar. Carl looked down at the picture of the drink resting next to the money. He pondered for a moment, downing the drink and taking all the cash. He followed that thought with one in which he would consume the alcohol and leave the appropriate cash value on the bar when he took the rest of the money. Then time seemed to stand still once again, and he was surprised as this moment lacked the predictable exhilaration of performing that he had come to expect such warping of time would arise from. He thought, this is the choice and turning point that she spoke about. This is one of the moments where I have called it to me with the purpose of selecting my own preferences and parameters of fate. Danny called it interactive destiny, and that crazy little girl might be right. So this is it. This moment holds for me the option of developing myself along one path or another, and the road I walk is my choice. Comfortable inebriation or uncertain sobriety. Do I risk knowing myself as I truly be, knowing full well that I might not be the kind of person I would feel worthy of communicating? Or do I continue the cycle of numbing myself to the quest of total self-awareness? Why is the back of my neck tingling with chills? Why does the air I inhale suddenly feel saturated with nourishing depth? If this is what waking to truth feels like, then I choose continuation of this newness of being. I am, as I refer to myself, I, and this is who I shall embrace. The flow of movement returned to the room, and he fluidly placed one hand on the cash and used the other to slide the drink further away from him. "Thank you, Cindy," he said with a certainty in his voice he was not expecting. "Get this to Kevin, please." He quickly scanned the money to verify the amount, doing the math quickly to see that the cash value of 4 drinks usually given as compensation amounted to nearly 1/3 the entirety of the cash. "And this is accurate?" The disbelief of the amount was evident in his tone of voice. Cindy widened her eyes in a gesture that showed him he should keep this bit of information to himself so as to not let the other performers know how much of their compensation they would drink away. She nodded while the rest of her face wore no further expression. Carl exhaled with such a realization that his cheeks slightly inflated with the air escaping through his narrowly opened lips. His eyes widened too, and he pocketed the cash. He could see in his periphery that Kevin was nearing the bar as Mac introduced the next performer. "Give Mac an extra big kiss for me, will ya?" he asked Cindy, who smiled and looked away. As he walked towards the door, Carl turned and walked backwards to address Kevin. "A good set and much props to you. There's a Grand Marnier on the bar with your name on it." He pointed, directing Kevin's sweaty brow and attention to the road Carl had chosen not to take. Feeling his back touch the door, he inhaled and felt a hopeful smile involuntarily appear on his face. He thought about what his time sober would bring, and what he might do to commemorate this turning point in his life. Leaning into it, he pressed open the door, turned and greeted the night air with senses primed to recognize and accept the blessings of his life. He thought it fitting that he thanked the reader.